join my little teapot. Would somebody be the doorkeeper? Thank you. Oh, thank you. And if we can bow our heads for a word of prayer. Dear God, thank you for giving us the opportunity to live in America. Thank you for these and all of the blessings, and help us to be the kind of people you'd have us be. All these things we ask in Christ's name. Amen. First of all, we'd like to thank y'all for coming, and we're going to let Commissioner Black go first. I think he's got to go down to South Georgia in a hurry, and so we're going to let him and he is actually on the tracking sheet. Agriculture is first, so we're not that we wouldn't do you, but
no, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
But anytime you have a conflict and somebody's got to go, I'll be glad to switch them around, and I know everybody will be glad to work with you anyway where we can to make it more convenient with y'all. Thank you,
Madam Chair. Good afternoon, members of the committee, and it's a pleasure to be with you again. And to the Chair's comment, I appreciate your kindness, but I always hesitate on everybody's busy. So y'all are busy, and we all want to be busy, but Donaldsonville is a long way. and yes, ma'am. Well, I appreciate it. But thank y'all too for. I know we did. This is certainly about the coming year, but I did want to give you one real quick report. I know we had to come back and we cut back some of those the timing on those. I think we had 4 openings at the last committee, and we pushed those back. We took the thing in those appropriations back so that we could still get people employed March 1 and afterwards. And that's worked real well. Matter of fact, we slipped one in on the wire, so we're down to 3, but we're working diligently. We want you to know. But thank you for your support in that regard. Madam Chair, all we have is really there's no additions in our 19 report to you, but there was a little bit difference in what we requested and then what's actually in the recommendation. We were hopeful. With a bond package, we're about $1 million short of what we requested, and that $1 million would be exclusively for the Tifton lab, because those are the kind of capital investments with different types of laboratory equipment. That facilities, we keep it up very well, and we're in good shape, but it is time to make some investments again, and we'd asked that of the governor, but we're not successful. But if the committee had any room as we move forward, that would be a wonderful addition that we'll make good use of.
Can you just get us the paper and sort of explain what you're requesting?
Yes, ma'am. There are gas chromatographs. There are those types of laboratory equipment that affect. Yes, ma'am. We'll give you a detailed. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And Dr. Shugart, our director there, has that. We have that for you, and we'll provide it for the committee. Yes, ma'am. And Madam Chair, the last thing I'm happy to answer any budget questions. We do have a report for you on the Atlanta Farmers Market too. But my understanding is that, and the author's right here, so we have a gate bill, and if that piece of legislation goes pretty much like it is presented right now, it's going to result in a considerable amount of money. But there's some considerable more additional responsibilities you're asking of us, and we just simply like to ask at the proper time if y'all favor us. That money is not considered. I mean, it comes into the state treasury, but I don't believe that's contemplated in the revenue estimate. And the intent is if we can administer this program, we'll have some additional needs at the department, but we'd also like to do some more contractual work with Department of Revenue so we can get the proper audits done. And Chairman Powell and Chairman England and I have talked about that, but we'll just have to kind of wait to see how much money, if that comes about, and we'll be prepared to give you a good plan on that as well. But right now, we're kind of grabbing in the air, not exactly sure what that's going to be. Likewise, we've had some other very interesting discussions about y'all's hard work on rural development. We've had some members ask us to say we may have some ideas of something for y'all to do in this initiative, and if that comes our way, we'll be good stewards of that too. But once again, it's probably a little too early to talk about that. But I know Chairman Watson's had some discussions with the governor's office and with other people too, and Chairman England. So just the gate and rural development, those may be two other things that we didn't exactly know to ask for, but we think we can do a good job with it if you send it our way. Does anybody else have any other question about the budget per se?
I just wanted to explain explain the 13.2, 13.2.5. You're making a transfer of your technical over to Department of Administrative Services.
Yes, ma'am. There's some. Have you got that, Bo? Madam Chair, I don't have it right in front of me.
And that's just so you can get your IT people all in one department, I understand. Is that not right?
No, ma'am. All our IT will still stay exactly.
I think they were in Consumer Protection, and you were transferring it over to Department of Admin.
He's saying yes.
You're transferring 8 people from Consumer Protection over to Department of Administrative Services.
Madam Chair, I'm embarrassed. I'll have to.
I got you.
Jimmy's here. Our CFO's here. We've talked about a lot of things. But we haven't talked about that.
Exactly. Good evening, ma'am. Sorry. The question?
Well, I was asking about the transfer from Consumer Protection over to Department Administration.
Correctly. At some point in time, there were a number of people in the IT group, because of budgetary needs, were moved into Consumer Protection, even though they're managed by the IT director. So as we're going through the admin section, trying to determine really what it takes to manage that, we're trying to get them all, from a budgetary management standpoint, back in one place.
When you said I'm sorry, that's what threw me off, Madam Chair. What this is all internal. No,
It's
ma'am, it
purely,
doesn't go
yeah.
to DOAS. That's what was throwing me off. This is our internal. We have people that are in our IT division. They answer to the CIO, but they have so many. They have responsibilities that might be tied to consumer protection, and so we're just realigning those budgets. That we only have 3 program areas. We have consumer protection, we have marketing and administration, And so it's more appropriate to move them out of that administration budget area over to consumer protection. And so forgive me, I glanced at that and thought it said DOAS too. That's why I was looking at, but it's just.
It's just internally, it's just an internal transfer to really realign those assets with how they are currently being managed, that's all.
No new, all same money, it's just between the three program areas. We have three program areas.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
And I looked at DOA and I thought it said DOAS too, so that's why I was, Madam Chair, you asked for an update on the Atlanta market, and y'all were kind. This has been one of the more interesting projects. It is the most interesting project I've had to deal with in doing this job for 7 years. We've got a big new 72,000 square foot 21st century produce house that we've been trying to build for 3 years, and it's not built yet. We've got a timeline we'd be happy to share with you. I did call JISFIC on Friday, and I said, I'm going to a committee Monday, and I'm going to tell them yet again that it's stalled. And then all of a sudden I did, thankfully, got a call this morning, and all of a sudden we're on the bid sheet today. So it's ready to be bid. But if you would allow me to, our director of marketing is here, Mike could opine a little more and give you, we can both share some details, but would that be appropriate?
Yes,
This is Mr. Jack's
please.
approval.
This is an example of where everything was greased and everything was on track, and I think every effort was in place. Share with you, this was an FY 2016 bond package. We were reached out to in May of 2015 by JISFIC saying, let's be very proactive, let's get this thing under control. Actually, in June of 2015, an RFP and RFQ was sent out to find a design professional to build this project. Interviews were held in August of 2015. Negotiation and final contract with the design professional was in September of 2015. We actually had the first interview with the tenant and the design professional in December of 2015. Now, I want to quantify a little bit, if I might, about the tenant. There's a short list of people who can occupy a $9 million facility, pay the rent on that facility because they have to repay that investment, but yet they're going to have to come out of pocket themselves to supply the refrigeration, the racking system, the office furniture, the IT system, and everything else they need. So in round numbers, these people not only need to be able to take possession of this building, they've got to come up with about a $4 million investment before they actually take possession of it and make it a useful building. So with that said, naturally, the tenant has a lot of input in the design criteria of the building that they're forced to outfit and make payments on. I will concede that this tenant was a bit demanding. I will also say that the design professional who was chosen by a committee and hired through JISFIC has turned out to be rather cumbersome in the least. I think there's no question that they're probably going to be blacklisted from doing business. I think they're very competent, very capable, but I think in the hundreds of $1 million projects they deal with, they have not given us very much due diligence. So through the entire calendar year of 2016 and 2017, I did not chronologically list the meetings. The Department of Ag has been available at every question, every possibility we have fulfilled. I know JISFIC has their share of problems, but I think that the lion's share of this goes to the choice of a design professional who was a mistake, and I think, quite honestly, would have probably earlier on been terminated from this job, but I think we went down the road so far we saw it being a further delay to change too late in the race. And now, as the commissioner so aptly put, we've already chosen building contractors on the short list, and they're supposed to be getting bid packages yet today. And that's not what any of us want, Madam Chairman. But we can't reset the clock as much as we'd love to.
I'm sure I probably have some questions.
This is just now taking bids,
Yes.
and so then there's how long's the bid process and?
We have been promised by Marvin Woodward with GISFIC that it's going to be as rapid as humanly possible. They said they would shortcut, not for the sake of the project being shortcut, so to speak, but they would do everything in their power at GISFIC to have this thing in groundbreaking ASAP.
But you're looking at 2020.
No,
Fall of 2019 in our fiscal year 2020 before something's done.
I would
completed,
hope
or-
not, sir. These things, if you understand, a cooler warehouse as such is a concrete slab with cooler panels and a steel structure roof on it and some interior walls. They go up real quickly when you finally get to go up, and very, very limited earthwork will need to be done on the site.
Thank you.
Well, how could we have speeded this up? Did you need any help? I mean,
Madam Chairman, I wish I knew looking back on it. It's become famous in the annals of all the people with GISFIC. They give this project some rather odd pet names. The project from Purgatory and other things that shall go unnamed. Because it seems like everything we've touched is broken, from the prospects of the design professional, some health issues on that part for some of their staff, a movement of their location. And I will have to say, by their own profession, GISFIC has said we had some other projects that did not let us give it the due diligence we should have when it started getting off track.
The Cyber Center had.
Yes, that was mentioned. That was
Okay.
mentioned.
all right. Any questions? Thank you, and we look forward to having that building ready to go.
Thank you, no more than we. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank y'all so much. Next, we'll have Georgia Soil and Water Conservation. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee.
Thank you. I don't know how many of y'all remember Director Atway. I'm secure, excuse me. Nice to have you here today.
Yes, ma'am. Pleasure to be here. I'd like to begin with thanking the committee and their help with our amendment for FY18. Those vehicles are going to come in handy. I appreciate the consideration of that. Moving forward into our FY19 budget, I feel there's two items that I need to bring up. One would be you would see an increase in funding for emails. That's almost $38,000, $37,632. Those emails will serve our staff members as well as the local soil and water conservation district supervisors. It's a project we've had underway for a couple of months. Excited about getting it kicked off in its full capacity. The other funding that I want to bring up is the $5.5 million bond funding for dam rehab. We have that money projected to go to a dam in Columbus that currently NRCS is handling the planning and design on. So when that wraps up in the next couple of months, we'll be able to roll that funding right into construction. And Madam Chair, that is my FY19 budget updates, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
I'm sure there might be a question on $36,000 for emails.
Yes, ma'am.
That's mostly because of the secure server.
Yes, sir.
That's where the expense is.
Yes, sir. It's I can break down that cost to you. GTA is $8 a month service charge per mailbox. This works out to $96 a year. We're looking at having 20 of those mailboxes in-house for our staff, and then the remaining balance will go to the 372 district supervisors throughout the state and the local conservation districts. And that's to the penny, that $37,632.
That's just the cost of the $96 times the $290 or.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Times the 300.
Where did the $5.5 million on the dam? Where is that? Is that on here that I'm not seeing it? You mentioned the.
Yes, sir. That's not OPB throws that in the very back of the budget when they list bond funds, but
Okay. Dam. Yeah. What'd you say it was for?
Yes, sir. Dam rehab and for a dam, Category 1 dam in
Got the
Columbus,
dam
Georgia.
part out, but I couldn't remember what you said.
We say that a lot in our office.
No, I couldn't remember what you said there. Thank you, ma'am.
I've got one other question.
Yes,
I've
ma'am.
had some representatives come to me, and some cities and counties desire to provide on the soil and water plan review. They want an independent, certified contractor because it's quicker and everything is growing in the metropolitan area so fast, and the turnaround time. And can you tell me, the AG listed, didn't he issue an opinion? Can you share with us what that opinion was?
I will tell you, they have told me their opinion is done. I was on the phone with them on the way here this afternoon. I was expecting a letter in the office today when I get back tomorrow with their opinion. They told me that would be probably tomorrow or Wednesday before they mail that and have that. So
they have not issued an opinion out yet.
No, ma'am. We're looking for that and monitoring it.
Okay. So you don't know how long the turnaround is before they can get approved. If a town has a contractor, what's the turnaround time to get it certified? Or what's the process?
Okay. Let's start at the first step. First, the county or the city would have to be an approved local issuing authority, an LIA by EPD. At that time, the commission either starts reviewing plans or they can seek out a MOA with us in the local district that they're in to review their own plans. If they choose to do that, we require two what we refer to as overviews, where we go and sit down with their staff to make sure that they can handle what they're about to take on.
Well, when you say staff, a lot of the smaller towns could not have a full-time person. And can they apply, can they contract with the law says they can contract with an independent contractor to do this, can't they?
We understand that the smaller town situation, and that's why we have asked the Attorney General's office to look into the matter to make sure that we're not only protecting us, but the LIA if they
Okay.
go that way.
All right. So we've got to wait till the letter comes from the Attorney General since they haven't done it yet.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Any other questions regarding that? Thank you. I appreciate it. And thanks for the job you're doing. Department of Community Affairs. Commissioner Nunn, this is your second time being with us this year, so glad to have you.
Thank you for having me,
My questions
Madam
are-
Chair, members of the committee.
Okay.
I'm glad to report that the team at DCA is busy executing on our mission of building strong community, helping to build strong, vibrant communities across the state. I know I provided a summary of our activities at the amended budget hearing, so I won't bother you to repeat all those details. In the FY19 budget, we aren't requesting much in the way of additions, but there are a number of changes, so I'll be happy to walk through those if you want to just
Okay.
refer to your tracking sheet. Under coordinated planning 16.2.1, this would eliminate $100,000 in one-time funds that were directed through DCA to the Coastal Regional Commission for purposes of grants to the Coastal Greenway. This is a path that extends really the totality of the Atlantic coast. These funds were actually recommended for elimination in our FY18 budget, but the legislature preserved them. I can report that the Coastal Regional Commission has made 5 grants this year, totaling $90,000 for purposes of greenway construction. On the under Departmental Administration 16.3, items 1 through 4 are common changes, administrative changes reflected in the agency's budgets. 16.3.5 would eliminate $50,000 in one-time funds to the Martin Luther King Jr. Advisory Council. These funds were included in the 18 budget to provide both for the annual celebration that takes place here in the Capitol, commemorating Dr. King's birthday, as well as for the placement of a statue of Dr. King on the Capitol grounds, which was dedicated last August. Under on the second page of mine, I think it's page 22 in yours, under 16.9 special housing initiatives, there's actually no changes in this year's budget, but I did want to highlight two things from last year's budget. As directed, DCA did transfer roughly $225,000 from the special housing initiatives to the Georgia Advocacy Office, which advocates for people with disabilities throughout the state. And further, we directed $100,000 to the statewide Independent Living Council to provide home modifications necessary, excuse me, to help people keep people with disabilities in their homes. I believe that year to date, about 50,000 of that 100,000 has been drawn down by that private nonprofit. Moving on, under 16.10.1, under the state community development programs, first of all, 16.10.1, that eliminates $50,000 in one-time funds for the Warrior to Citizen Resilience and Reintegration Program. And then 16.10.2 further eliminates an additional $25,000 in funding to the Second Harvest of South Georgia. With respect to Second Harvest, I'll remind you that these funds were actually recommended for removal in last year's budget, but the devastating tornadoes that came through the state at the beginning of the legislative session last year, those funds were preserved by the legislature and were used to address some of the storm damage issue by this nonprofit. Lastly, under 1 Georgia, section 1614, we're requesting an additional $3.5 million to fund economic development projects. You may recall in my previous remarks, I highlighted the work of 1 Georgia. Over the past 5 years, we've invested more than $60 million in 64 communities in every county across the state outside the metro area. And these investments have resulted in more than $3 billion in private investment and generated roughly 15,200 jobs in the more rural parts of our state. However, I don't think my remarks did the program justice in terms of highlighting its effectiveness nor accountability for results. So today I wanted to just talk to those 2 points. First of all, the 1 Georgia program today operates 2 distinct programs, and I know many of you are aware of these. Each is a reimbursement-based grant program, so no funds are distributed prior to our receiving receipts for eligible expenditures from grantees, and those grantees are units of local governments or cities or counties or local development authorities. The EDGE program is a deal closing fund intended to incentivize jobs and private investment. For example, in my previous remarks, I mentioned WL Plastics, which brought 60 new jobs to Bullock County, Fram Renewable Fuels, which created 79 new jobs in Jeff Davis County, and Vanguard Trailer, which is projected to create 400 jobs in Dade County in northwest Georgia. 1 Georgia also has a capacity building fund known as the Equity Program, which invests in economic development infrastructure to assist rural communities in preparing for growth. This program takes into account local investment or skin in the game, as well as prospect flow and other factors. As examples of the equity's involvement in the state, we assisted in the preparation of a grad site in Twiggs County, the addition of wastewater capacity in a rapidly expanding industrial park in the rural northern part of Bryan County, and also the development of new industrial capacity in Berrien and Coffee counties. In terms of the accountability of this program, the governance rests with the 1 Georgia Authority Board, which is chaired by the governor and is inclusive of representation from both legislative bodies. This board reviews recommendations quarterly and approves all grants. Then once approved, each project is monitored for progress, including its adherence to a performance and accountability contract. So this is looking at the jobs creation and private investment, And I mentioned that this program is responsible for the creation of more than 15,000 jobs over the past 5 years. But on the rare occasion in which the expectations are not met, then DCA will exercise the state's clawback provision for funds and or assets. One other point that I want to make before answering any questions that you might have, you all may recall in the amended budget that additional One Georgia funds were sought for a specific purpose on the coast. If approved, those funds will be so directed as a third program, if you will, adjacent to the EDGE and equity, designed to address an important aspect of the economies of our coastal community. But the requested add in the FY19 budget is really to support demand in our two existing economic development programs. In the speaker's remarks at the Chamber's Eggs and Issues breakfast, I noted that he talked about a 24% increase in the Department of Economic Development's project pipeline year over year. Now, while that doesn't directly equate or correlate to One Georgia, because One Georgia is limited to projects that take place in particular areas of the state, I think it is indicative of increased demand. And on the capacity building side, I can tell you that over the past 3 years, we have seen a steady increase, approximately 40% increase in the number of applications for equity awards. Anecdotally, I will tell you that there's also been a significant improvement in the quality of those applications, and I attribute some of that to the work of our regional staff, but also certainly to the hardworking communities. In our current cycle, which is under review as we speak, it's the third round of the FY18 cycle. I'll tell you that just the applications in-house, if approved, will exhaust a significant amount of the available equity funds. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer questions.
First of all, I've got two questions, okay? I think the Warrior to Citizens Resilient and Integrated Programs, was that a success?
The Warrior to Citizens, we put the money in, and I can tell you that it was helpful. It's essentially a counseling program to help people transition. So I think that's been successful. Again, we've not administered that program. We simply administered the grant. And I can get you a report on the success criteria.
Okay, and I think that was a one-time funding.
It's correct. That was.
And all right, the next thing on the Economic Development Fund, the $303.5 million.
One Georgia.
Okay, the One Georgia Fund. Now, this will go into the equity fund that you administer.
Equity and Edge. That's correct.
And it won't be transferred out anywhere else. It'll be money that you administer.
This money is for the economic development projects. That's correct.
Okay. Do you still abide by the the One Georgia Authority is sort of a touchy subject down in South Georgia because that was our tobacco money, right? And so, do y'all still go by the same ruling that only certain it used to be just a few counties could get it, and then it branched out to other counties.
Right.
Do y'all still go by those rules? So,
yes, we do. And you and I have had plenty of conversations about this, and I've talked with our staff. We actually have, the One Georgia Authority was consolidated into DCA, and I apologize, I don't know the exact date, but we do have one of our regional representatives actually has worked for the One Georgia Authority back to 2001, and we've reviewed board minutes back to 2001. Indicating that the same criteria that we use today to define the eligibility has been in place back to that point based on the board rules. This is a map, and I'm happy to share it with you. I'm sorry I don't have extra copies that demonstrates the eligibility. There are the Atlanta metro area is not eligible for One Georgia funding. There are other metro areas across the state that are what we call conditionally eligible, and that means that it has to be has to have a regional impact, and you have to have regional buy-in. The majority of the state is the rural part of the state, and as you know, Madam Chair, we have a lot of rural Georgia.
Well, eventually, though, it was just for the people who gave up their tobacco allotment.
That is my understanding. Yes, ma'am.
When it first started.
Yes,
That was
ma'am.
phase 1 and 2. When does the tobacco settlement money end?
So I was looking at that, I was looking into that issue after our last conversation, and I know that it, or I understand that it extends through at least 2025, but I believe it's 2023 or 2025.
Okay. Do I have any questions from the committee? Okay. Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioner, when you were talking about 1 Georgia, you said if the expectations are not met, the state exercises clawback. Can you speak on that?
Yeah, and again, I'll reiterate what I said. We will we put in place for job creating projects. We put in place a performance and accountability contract. This was actually an enhancement that was made to the program about 10 years ago. That outlines the specific expectations in terms of jobs creation and the specific expectations in terms of private investment. We monitor all of these projects and all of these funds until the project is closed out. And if there are issues, we start to address those in conjunction with our colleagues at Department of Economic Development as those arise. But when we get to the closeout period, we look back and we look at those threshold criteria, and if you have not met those threshold criteria, then there is a clawback provision that we will execute and require repayment of the money.
Thank you.
Representative Cook.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question about the 3.5 that I wanted to ask. I know in the amended with the 10 million ask, you mentioned it was an educated estimate as to what you would need at that time.
Right.
Can you talk just a little bit about the 3.5? And I'm sure it's
Right.
probably an educated estimate on something. Do you have a
So and that's
area?
why I said I feel like I didn't satisfy your question in the amended. But this is a grant program, right? So
Right.
so yes, the 10 that we talked about in the amended was an educated assessment. This is really looking at demand, looking at need, and yes, it's an educated assessment. It actually represents about a 15% increase over our base funding, which if I talk about the demand on the equity side, which I can specifically speak to, and I'm sure my colleague in Department of Economic Development may be able to elaborate a little bit more on the EDGE program. But we've seen a 40% increase. We're not looking to match that. We're simply looking to increase the capacity of the grant program to address need throughout the state.
Okay, thank you.
Representative P.
Quick question. What's the average size of these grants?
Quick detail that.
So this is not a mathematical calculation because I don't have that number, but I will tell you that the typical size of an EDGE grant is probably in the 150 to 500 range. The typical size of an equity grant, I'm just thinking through this last cycle, so I'll give you a representation of one. The maximum award is $500,000. And I believe that we have several in the 1 to 200,000 range, and then, as you might expect, we have a number at the maximum.
Any other questions? Thank you, and thank you for the job you're doing.
Thank you very much.
And next, we will have the Georgia Environmental Finance Authority. Thank you, Director Clark. Thank you for coming.
Well, thanks for the invitation. Appreciate being here. And good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I had a 65-slide presentation I wanted to go over with you, but in the interest of time, I thought I'd
thank
shorten
you.
it up. Just wanted to spend a few moments refreshing your memory about what GFA does. We operate two operational divisions. One is our Energy Resources Division, which has two federally funded programs primarily. The first is the State Energy Program, and that program is designed to support renewable energy projects and projects that reduce energy consumption. And then the other federally funded program is the Weatherization Assistance Program, which provides energy conservation measures to low-income households throughout all the 159 counties of Georgia. Just to touch on a few highlights of that program, those two programs for this past year. And the State Energy Program worked in conjunction with the Technical College System of Georgia to create a curriculum and a program down at Savannah Tech for students to learn how to install, maintain, and repair solar panels. And so that seems to be working very well down there. And then the Weatherization Assistance Program really put in some conservation measures in some 752 homes that benefited some 1,300 Georgians for about $4 million. So those are the two primary energy programs that we have. Our Water Resources Division is our other operational division. With that program, we actually operate 4 loan funds that provide water, sewer, solid waste, and land conservation financing. 2 of the loan funds are state-funded, and 2 of them are federally funded. The 2 state-funded programs are the Georgia Fund and the Georgia Reservoir Fund. The 2 federally funded programs are the Clean Water State Revolving Fund and the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund. Clean Water State Revolving Fund is really a fancy word for sewer work, but it's not that funny. Anyway, thank you. This is a tough room. Anyway, just want, and in your materials you have a few highlights relative to what our interest rates are and everything, but I did want to touch on some of the accomplishments for this past year. We awarded 64 communities loans through the execution of 71 loans to the total of about $128 million. You can see about 750,000 Georgians benefited from those loan programs, and we saved those communities about $31 million in financing costs over the life of those loans. So all in all, a pretty good year for the loan programs. I wanted to go over our appropriations request, and should be pretty brief on that. Our state appropriations, we're looking, it hasn't gone up at all from FY18. It's $788,000. Hang on. Almost there.
Okay, I noticed that you've got the Metro North Georgia Water Planning District. Aren't those people that came to us and wanted more money?
They probably did.
Okay, I didn't know if you were.
Oh, I knew. Yeah, we don't. This really operates as somewhat of a pass-through for us. So, if they came and lobbied for you guys for more money, we support the governor's budget and governor's request.
Well, they were telling us they were a state agency, but we could not find that they were a state agency.
The council was established through legislation way back in, I want to say it was 2000, something like that. But it's not really a state agency. It's associated with the Atlanta Regional Commission.
Okay. Thank you.
But our cash appropriation request is $788,495. $423,495 of that would be for the Georgia Rural Water Association. $200,000 would be for the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. And then $165,000 would go to the Resource Conservation and Development Districts, divided amongst those 11 districts at $15,000 a pop. And that's the same amount as we requested last year. Mm-hmm. And then under our Georgia obligation, general obligation bonds, we're requesting funds for the Georgia Fund Loan Program and our federal SRF match in a total of $16 million. And with that, Madam Chair, I stand ready to answer any questions I possibly can.
Do I have any questions? Did you have a question, Representative? Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
State Forestry Commission. Director Williams, good to have you with us again.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to be with you again. Michelle Gray, our Administrative Division Chief, is with me today, and glad you're back. We missed you.
In fact, I think I didn't go in order. I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Up to you, Madam Chair. I realize you were moving us up. We'd be glad to stand down and keep you in order if you would prefer.
That's fine. It won't take long. They don't mind.
Yes, ma'am. I just caught that. It will not take long.
It will not take long. It will not take long.
I was born at night, but it wasn't last night. Madam Chair, good to be in front of you.
I don't know how I did that. Okay.
We're just glad to be called at any point, Madam Chair.
Gosh.
Really not.
My ABCs to you. Okay. If y'all will turn to 26 Georgia Forestry Commission, it's just really one change in this.
Yes, ma'am. You are correct. The changes you're hearing from a lot of state agencies about with the adjustments and whatnot. The major change here is the deputy director position, and you may recall that when I went through the process and was selected for the director's position, not being a career employee, there was a recognition among our GFC board and the governor's office that we needed internal operations strength there. So with that blessing, we have gone through a hiring process, and our former forest management chief, Gary White, started on January 1 as our deputy director. He is doing the business he needs to do, so the funding for his position, the salary and the fringe benefits, Madam Chair, are shown in the budget. Really, the only other thing was our capital requests. Some of those dollars got moved up into the amended budget that we submitted for equipment. So some of that got moved up. So basically, what we have now in the big budget as far as capital is planning, design, construction money for four or five offices around the state. And what we're running into, Madam Chair, is we do a lot of our own construction. We still do a lot of our own construction. A lot of our buildings are just, quite honestly, they were sort of built, I don't want to say built on the cheap, but we built them very conservatively from the taxpayer dollar standpoint. They're really showing their age. And then the other thing we're running into is over time our equipment has evolved, and our dozers and our truck transports for those are now bigger than they were when a lot of these buildings were built. So, a building that would totally house a piece of equipment and keep it out of the elements 20 years ago, now we've got equipment sort of hanging out of both ends of the building as the equipment has gotten bigger. And we do believe that long term it makes sense to spend the dollars to have that equipment that we're going to be running for 20 years out of the weather. So that's what's driving some of this.
I had a question about the equipment. I'm sure some of y'all have had an opportunity to go visit where y'all were fighting the forest fires, and we have a lot of people that own bulldozers, Caterpillar, whatever you call them, that are not they're not environmental
cabs.
And I don't see how they get and fight in that smoke. How many do we have that don't have environmental cabs?
With last year's funding that you helped us put forth, and those dozers are coming online now, and I'm proud to say that those that have Caterpillar brand on them, some of the smaller mid-size units are actually being built in the new Caterpillar plant here in Georgia. But out of 300 and something dozers, we have about half of those now, Madam Chair, with environmental cabs on them. And again, we're moving towards, with obviously your support, trying to basically get all of those. We have a few maybe older Rangers that are old school that as they say, they like to be able to feel the heat from the fire to know when they're getting too close, but literally. But every time we have a retirement, their ranks go down, and the newer folks really like those environmental cabs from a safety standpoint.
They like to feel the heat.
Feel the heat.
I was just feeling sorry for them because they didn't have an environmental cab, but I'm sure the younger ones that are used to air conditioning. do
Yes,
well.
ma'am, and as we testified, you know, the new noses now run, you know, they're like airplanes. They're drive by wire. They have joysticks, if you will, is pretty much how you operate them. So we've got it's a new world in the equipment day and a new world in the employee day with our new folks coming on board.
What about we were having a lot of turnover and everything? How's your turnover rate? Is that better?
Madam Chair, unfortunately, it is not, and we were asked that question at previous testimony, and I've asked our folks to go back and look at it. In any given year, you know, we've got 550 employees agency-wide. Over 300 of those are on the forest protection side, and that's where the forest rangers and their management folks come into play. We're losing in any given year around 15% of our rangers to attrition. But what I've asked my folks to look at, I don't think that tells the whole story about that first 3 to 5 year attrition rate. We think we're probably spending $75,000 to $100,000 on a new ranger when he or she comes in the door for commercial driver's license and all of the safety training, equipment operation, and whatnot. And you know, our starting ranger pay is $28,000 and change. And what we're finding, Madam Chair, is that when they get a commercial driver's license and they get some seat time on a piece of heavy equipment, they become a valuable commodity in the private sector. And so we are still very challenged by turnover, particularly in the first 2 to 3 years. And we appreciate the support we've obviously gotten in the past, but this, I think, is an ongoing challenge. And from hearing other agencies, you know, talk about their issues, I don't think we're alone from that standpoint. But yeah, the challenge is still there.
Do I have any questions? Representative Cook. I'm sorry, I didn't
Thank you,
see
Madam Chair. Director Williams, good to have you here today. Let me first say thank you for the job that y'all do, particularly in the fire suppression stuff. I've actually seen that in person before, and that's quite amazing what y'all do, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
With regard to the deputy director position, can you speak to that? I mean, that position makes more than the speaker's office does. At what all that 179 entails?
Yes, sir. I'll be glad to. Thank you for that opportunity. That does the number you see, the 179,205, does include the fringe benefits. The base pay for that position is $109,000 or $110,000. Quite honestly, when this was a position we operated with a deputy director for several years before the Great Recession. And then as we were dealing with the budget challenges there, the deputy director position went away. So this is not brand new to the agency. It's sort of resurrecting a structure that we had previously. I'll be perfectly honest with you, that salary number is a little bit higher than we thought it was going to be. And that actually we proposed it, but when we were working with the folks in state government that help agencies look at job duties, number of employees that are managed, budget that is managed, and whatnot, that number actually rose a little bit during those discussions above what we were proposing.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, and now we'll get back on schedule.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. It didn't take too long. Department of Economic Development.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon,
Committee.
Commissioner Wilson, and thank you for being here today.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Glad to have you back in that seat. I think the last time I was here, you weren't. Your colleagues filled in for you admirably, but it's good to see you
Well,
again.
thank you. It's good to be back. And if we can turn over to economic development, I got
So, Madam Chair, just like most folks on the dais today, we don't have a lot of ads in our budget in 2019, so I'll point out the two changes. Both of them are pass-throughs for our agency. We really don't have anything to do with the money once it goes through the agency. The first is an increase of $50,000 through our tourism division, which is 23.9.2. It goes to the Martin Luther King Jr. Center for Nonviolent and Social Change. As y'all know, this is the 50th anniversary of Martin Luther King Jr.'s death, and so this money was moved to the MLK Center to help with the activities around this year, and I think it's very appropriate, and they've done a good job of keeping us informed in everything that they're doing. The other change was 23.9.3, which is eliminating funds for the Georgia Historical Society of $100,000. Those are generally the only two changes we have in our budget. Happy to take any questions that y'all have.
Do I have any questions?
Thanks, Al.
Well, the other change was
busy.
the transfer of workforce development.
Of course, it's just a little change.
Just a little change.
Yes, sir. Those were, of course, federal funds, and the Division of Workforce Development is going to move to TCSG. When we started this process and workforce development came to economic development from the governor's office, I think it was a fantastic move. And I do believe that we were able to align their programs with the strategic industries of Georgia, which they weren't necessarily doing before. But in trying to integrate them with our department, the mission of workforce development doesn't exactly match with economic development. One of the things that, the thing that we're tasked with is growing jobs and development all across the state. Workforce, we found, is many times is retraining. It's when people lose their jobs, and we all have seen WARN notices that our department has to issue. So when it comes down to just the mission of our departments, it doesn't quite add up. But when you're looking for a long-term home, the job of TCSG is to create a pipeline for the companies that are needing positions in Georgia, and they do an amazing job. In fact, TCSG is the biggest recipient of those federal WIOA dollars all over the state. I think for the last few years, we've had to actually return federal dollars that we did not spend in workforce, and so I believe they'll actually be able to maximize the federal funds better with TCSG. The good thing that came out of their time with us is they are aligned with our strategic industries. They have a sense of existing industry, which I don't think they were connected into before. And the piece that I'm most proud of was the High Demand Career Initiative came out of the workforce being with us. And so one of the things that the longevity, the legacy of that being with us is that workforce will now be able to convene a conversation between existing industry and our training divisions, and that will stick. So I'm very excited about that. But ultimately, I think this is a good move for them.
I had is that Representative Cook?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question about 23.4, the Georgia Council for the Arts, the special project. Can you speak to that, what that is exactly?
Let's see. This was the $300,000 that was added last year. Oh, yeah, that's right. So it's the Vibrant Communities Grant that was added, the special project. Vibrant Communities Grant is very simply a way for the Georgia Council for the Arts to reach into communities that don't necessarily get arts funding. And so we opened up who could actually apply for these grants. And generally, in the past, it has to be an arts organization, but for a Vibrant Communities Grant, it can be a school. It can be, a local arts organization, after-school arts program. These are very small grants that go to, say, Franklin County, Georgia, wanting to come to the High Museum and not being able to pay for their school buses. That's the kind of programs that this would be open to. So we created that. The legislature created that 2 years ago, I believe, and it has been fantastic. And we've seen every year the applications for those funds have gone up.
And some of the grants are like for $2,000 or $3,000. We can get your list if you'd like.
Absolutely.
A list of the ones that received the grants. I don't know if anybody in your district got one because they put them out on the internet, everybody that got one of those grants. They're real small.
And Representative Cook, those small grants really do, I think, go a lot further than some of the big ones too. It's a great program.
Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you all.
Public Service Commission. Commissioner.
You didn't have to go last.
Thank you.
Did what is it?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name's Chuck Eaton. I'm a commissioner on the.
Well, I think everybody knows
Well,
you. You've been around the block.
I have. I wasn't gonna give you my bio or anything,
I'm sorry,
but.
Nice to have you here.
Yes. Our chairman couldn't make it. He's out of town, so it's a pleasure to be back in front of the
Thank you.
committee.
It's always good to see you.
And I'm joined by our executive director, Deborah Flanagan, and our budget director, Terry Pritchard. And in short, our 2019 budget is a duplicate of the 2018 budget, other than the fact we are facing somewhat of a retirement crisis at the Public Service Commission. Over the next 3 years, we will have 21 employees eligible for retirement. That's a third of our 64 employees, the non-pipeline safety employees. So what we've asked for, I think it's a conservative estimate, is 9 positions, 3 a year for 3 years. I think it'd be safe to say, since we have 21 retiring over 3 years, that we could easily have that many retirements, if not more. And so the tragedy would be to have all of this institutional knowledge that has been acquired at the commission, much of it's highly technical work involving everything from nuclear to natural gas, to have that walk out the door and then post the job opening. In an ideal situation would be able to hire an employee and have them be trained by the people that are we expect will announce their retirements, and have some sort of continuity as we move forward at the commission.
Well, and when I look at these people retiring, they're just not. You got 3 attorneys, 6 engineers, 6 accounting, 6 utility analysts. It's just not somebody you could really just pull off the street to fill. You can't call Kelly Employment and send
No,
somebody out there.
not at all. And of course, the job market's a little tighter than it used to be. And as you mentioned, they're highly skilled positions.
Did everybody get this position? If y'all would look over it, and we will talk about that later. But I understand the problem. We had this same problem with was it forestry several years ago? One of the I think it was forestry. We've had this other problems before with people retiring and everything, and I understand y'all's problem, and we will see what we can do when we.
Well, I know you've always worked with us in the past, and appreciate you're taking a hard look at it.
But there's a lot of institutional knowledge walking around there, and when they walk out, who's gonna do it?
Exactly. It's a major concern of ours.
But we appreciate you breaking this down so we can look at it, and we will be talking about it.
And I believe Terry sent the list of the 21 employees over to you? Okay.
We've got the 21 employees and when they're retiring and all that, and we'll be we'll be looking at it.
Okay.
I'd like to ask the vice chairman if you'll be working with Morgan about this, looking over those things, those 21 employees, okay? Because we've got to do something about this. Okay.
Well, we very much appreciate your consideration.
It's concern too. It's consideration and concern.
Well, it is. It is.
It's a concern.
So.
But thank you so much. Anything else you'd like to bring before us?
Nothing at all. Appreciate your help and your hard work, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What'd you say?
Miss Lindsay for doing what?
All right, and next we're glad to have Director Poe from the Georgia World Congress Center, and also Lindsay Strickland is with him today.
Save the best for last, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the best for last, okay. The exciting things
It
for
is.
last.
Oh, all good stuff. Well, Madam Chair, thanks so much for the opportunity to spend some time with you this afternoon in regards to the Georgia World Congress Center Authority. We've prepared a packet for you, and I'd like to draw your attention really to three pieces that are within the packet. One is a deck that that we'll walk through very quickly. We also have a scorecard that reflects our last year activity on campus, as well as what we're looking to accomplish that we'll dive into in the presentation. So with that, I'll launch off. In FY17, the Georgia World Congress Center activities generated for the state of Georgia $1.8 billion in economic impact, which was built upon just under 3 million visitors that came to our campus to enjoy the convention, trade shows, and special events that we host in all the facilities. That supported just a little over 17,000 jobs. If you capture that both in hotels, restaurants, as well as what we employ on site. But the big number for us is in FY17 is $104 million in state sales tax only that was generated but for the events would have not occurred for the state. So that's a big number for us, and certainly one that we like to see grow as well. And if you recall, a lot of the convention trade shows also in the hotel rooms that they stay in contribute $5 a room night back to support transportation across the state of Georgia. So another big piece of our overall economic development and impact. If you go to the next slide, on slide 3, over the years, the state has been generous in supporting the authority with this $768 million in bond funds. That's supported $1.5 billion in sales tax, again, just to the state of Georgia. And so the net return coming off that to the state is reflected a little over $700 million back to the state through those activities. On looking at our campus, there's a couple of things I like to kind of go back just to tell you how we're using the funds that the state has been supporting us with. And the first one is Centennial Olympic Park, which is a legacy from the '96 Olympic Games that was gifted to the authority. Following that games, we recently went through a capital campaign. Over 2 fiscal years, the General Assembly provided $5 million in support to the park. We leveraged that for $22 million in private sector donations that are going in to upgrade the park, and those projects are underway today. So we finished up Phase 1, which is the Metro Chamber building, which used to be adjacent to our campus. We acquired that, removed the building, and expanded into that space with green space and walks and so forth to really give us a clear view presence back to the Congress Center. In addition to that, over the course of this calendar year, in calendar 18, we'll be improving 2 other gateway portals into the park, one at Bakers and Centennial Olympic Boulevard, which will be an extension of a water feature. If you're familiar with the park, it's adjacent to or across from the Children's Museum, adjacent to the World of Coke, so that will become a major portal entry into the park. If you travel up Baker Street to the west, more closely aligned to the aquarium, our operations building is there currently. We're taking that down. And we'll convert that into a plaza, what we call the Paralympic Plaza. That will be, again, part of the legacy of the Olympic Games, but a special place of remembrance there. We're updating the Southern Company Amphitheater. And then the Andrew Young International Boulevard that used to be a roadway that bisected the park. We closed that down about 2 years ago. That is all will be converted into a pedestrian mall that will link from COP Boulevard, where Andrew Young currently dead ends, into the park. We've gotten approval from the IOC and the USOC to put the Olympic rings as an iconic sort of gateway portal entry into that location, and then that pedestrian mall will link back up to Andrew Young International Boulevard at Marietta Street, and will create sort of a seamless stitch between what we call the North Park and South Park within Centennial Olympic Park. If you flip over to the next slide, it talks about the contiguous exhibition facility. Last year, the General Assembly approved a $55 million contribution. That project will launch in May. Holder is our contractor. We're using P-Golf Interests, Atlanta, Georgia firms in the design for that. We told you when we talked about this particular project that with the activities that we could go after by allowing us to create 1 million square feet of contiguous exhibit space, that we could produce just under $700 million in economic impact, and we're well on our way to doing that. So if you look at, in the packet is this sheet, if you'll look at the heading that says current customers that have booked shows and future customers that will use this particular project, you'll see that the aggregate total of that is just over $300 million of economic impact, and every one of the groups that are listed there have booked because of that connection. The balance that are at the top of the sheet are active groups that we're seeking currently, and we feel very, very confident that we'll penetrate that group substantially so that we can realize the economic impact. It's been a great investment, a tremendous sales tool for us in generating activity. And a lot of the things that we do also, if you look at the woodworking show, the poultry show, the Fab Tech meeting that's noted on there, each of those have a relationship also in terms of exports coming out of the state. Poultry is one of the largest export products going through the Savannah port, and woodworking products. Both of those two conventions are based in Georgia, headquartered in Georgia, and have been very integral in the process of design for that exhibit space. As I said, the next slide will give you a picture of what that looks like. It's basically a rectangle box that will connect and stitch two pieces of our exhibit facility, but a very important element in terms of that overall economic program. The budget was approved in 17. We finished the design in December of 17. Construction begins May, and then will be completed in December 2019 with that work. So it's a very aggressive schedule, but a very doable schedule that will allow us to meet the demands of the groups that have booked into that space presently. What we want to talk about today is a project that on a going forward basis, we've looked really at Andrew Young International Boulevard that goes up through our campus around to Mercedes-Benz Stadium and links up back to Centennial Olympic Park Boulevard. It really has three basic concerns or elements we're trying to address. So if you look at the slide 10 in your packet, I'll give you the sort of the first head-on view. This would be from Marietta Street. If you were standing at the Omni Hotel looking back towards the west, that would be the perspective that you would see on that particular slide. There are three elements to this project. One is public safety. We have a really strong concern about the mixture of cars and people, in particular in light of some of the terrorist incidents that have occurred in recent times. So we're seeing this as an opportunity to really create more of a physical separation between people and vehicles. In addition to that, it also has a traffic component. And one of the other slides that we'll look at, we want to take the buses that use that turn from Andrew Young International from Marietta going west on Andrew Young International, to get them off that intersection so that we create, coming out of the park with that pedestrian mall that I mentioned to you for Andrew Young International Boulevard, basically would continue on up as you get past Marietta, up through the campus, and would be the first separation between people and cars. Buses, if you move over to basically it'd be slide 17, we would create, I'm sorry, 12, excuse me, like my eyeballs are giving out on me. We would take the buses and create what we call a bus depot or parking area. So the buses would come around Centennial Olympic Park Boulevard and enter into the bus depot location for offloading of conventioneers coming into the facility. There's a subsequent slide on 13 that gives you the full extent of what that would look like. But again, keeping people, vehicles, and traffic sort of moving in a more orderly fashion around the campus. The project is total $36 million. We're seeking to break it into 2 phases because we really can't do the work all at one time because it'd be so disruptive to the activities we got going on that you really have to break it into two points. The governor put in his budget, which we're very thankful for, $7.5 million for phase 1. Would be seeking from the committee their support of moving that number to $15 million, another 7.5 on top of that. The total project, as I said, is $36 million, and then the balance we would come back in next year in order to accomplish and complete both phases of this project, which would again address our public safety concerns, traffic management, but doing it in a way that really makes it a more pleasant environment for people to be around. So it's not just the Jersey barriers that you would see in most circumstances around the complex. That project, assuming that we receive the support of the General Assembly, we've already done, paid for out of Congress Center resources, the initial planning phase of that. As it may not have mentioned to you, but each year we put in out of our own dollars that we generate more geared towards capital maintenance, about $3 million this last year. On average, we put in between $2 to $3 million out of our own resources generated off the business that we do. But the larger capital asks we're not able to fund, like the exhibit hall piece. But we believe that the economics associated with that in terms of sales tax dollars coming back to the state more than reimburses the General Assembly for the activities that would support through that transaction. So that's what we're looking for this coming session. I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Do I have any questions from the committee? No questions? Thank you, and
All
thank
right,
you for
thank
the
you, Madam
job you're
Chair.
doing.
Yes, ma'am.
Wait.
Thank y'all very much.
Thank you. This is sort of off the record. I went to the Georgia-Auburn game, and I didn't have any trouble getting in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, but I've heard some people complaining that they had a terrible time. I'm turning me off.